Hey guys, welcome back to Cage Chat. Now it has been a while, but we're kicking off things in UFC 236 with a recap of what is probably the best event of the year. And it's only April. Now UFC 236 was somewhat mocked in the build-up to being an interim sort of event, 2 interim titles on the line, and oh boy were we proved wrong. An interim title seemed to be one that many are hoping for and proud of now as we look forward into the UFC's future. Now, the likes of Colby Covington and Tony Ferguson have previously been interim champions and not gone on to be able to unify or have the chance to unify their belts. Now this is because injuries to both counterparts, and the sort of rule is under Dana White's terminology and understanding is that belt is almost a number 1 status. If you can't make the fight, someone else steps up, then you lose the interim championship, which is somewhat fair, but as we see, the likes of Tony Ferguson and Colby Covington are yet to have title matches, whilst Conor McGregor and Kamaru Usman both fought Nurmagomedov and Tyron Woodley respectively. So what is the point of an interim championship? We found out on Saturday night or Sunday morning in the UK. We came out to a co-main event and I was absolutely terrified for Israel Adesanya, and I shouldn't be. For some reason he's someone who's picked my interest as a fan, and being 16-0, he did recently fight Anderson Silva, and again the nerves kicked in there, and Kelvin Gastelum was meant to be on that card facing Robert Whittaker. Now Robert Whittaker pulled out due to a sports hernia, and this is where the interim middleweight championship bout came from. Now Israel Adesanya walked out first under the blue corner, and I was actually nervous for once. We hadn't seen him tested against someone like Kelvin Gastelum, who hits hard, who can wrestle, albeit he hasn't used his wrestling in a while. He seemed to be able to have those attributes that Israel Adesanya had not yet been tested against. And things almost got off to a disastrous start. In the first round, Kelvin Gastelum was able to pick him apart and did get a good shot in which knocked down Israel Adesanya or put him up against the cage. He was very quick to retreat, make some space and recovered from that, and produced one of the best fights you're going to see in the UFC octagon, especially this year. And I've been watching MMA and UFC for 2 years now almost, and that is up there with some of the best fights I've seen, probably the best, especially from an interest point of view, with Israel Adesanya being one of my favourite fighters on the roster currently. So yes, it went 1-1, 2-1 to Israel Adesanya in the third, and Kelvin clawed it back in the fourth. So it built it up to a beautiful 2-2 going into the 5th round, and Israel Adesanya picked him apart this time. Kelvin Gastelum, of course, having more experience in those championship rounds, but Israel Adesanya seems to have that heart, that grit. He's a skillful fighter. Now, as someone who's done kickboxing before and other martial arts, standing with that hands down stance, similar to MVP in Bellator, it can be dangerous. It can be, if you get caught on the chin, you leave yourself very easily able to be knocked down. But his head movement, his ability to swerve and slip punches are phenomenal, and that is what makes him one of the best at the moment. And he came off with the victory after, I believe, he got 3 knockdowns in that last round. He did get a knockdown in the second round, so that gave him those 2 rounds, and possibly most likely the 4th, and Kelvin Gastelum got the 1st and the 3rd. Now he almost did pull off submissions attempts, but he's come out later and said that he's had a bad knee, bad shoulder in camp, and he didn't quite manage to pull them off, an arm triangle and a guillotine respectively. Now he was looking for a 5th round finish, and he was hoping for that, as he is making a documentary, which should be a good watch for someone who's grown up in Nigeria, moved to New Zealand as a child, and is now becoming one of the UFC's biggest stars, with the likes of Conor McGregor out, John Jones not fighting the top caliber of fighters. I mean, he's fighting the top calibers, but it's not that storyline in terms of, it's not a DC kind of opponent. Now moving on to the main event, I was shattered after that 5-round war. 25 minutes and I was shaking, I was nervous, I was excited, and I felt every emotion a fight fan can possibly feel. But then you realise, oh, we still have one more fight. We have Max Holloway versus Dustin Poirier, a rematch. Max Holloway's very first loss in the UFC was against Dustin Poirier in a different division at featherweight. Since then, both have become pioneers and experts within the divisions, with Dustin Poirier moving up to lightweight and Max Holloway becoming the king of the featherweights and arguably the greatest ever featherweight amongst Conor McGregor and Jose Aldo, of course. So it was really Dana White who wanted Max Holloway to come up to 155. He was interested in some of the matchups, and he later came out and said in the press conference that he wasn't expecting Max Holloway to be so small. Now, Max Holloway did look significantly smaller than Dustin Poirier, but he did have an advantage in terms of velocity and speed of strikes, but it was Dustin Poirier who had the power. Now, there's a big debate over which fight was fight of the night, or fight of the year even, as we both had two fantastic fights, probably the best co-main and main event you've seen within the past year or two especially. And I gave it to Israel being fight of the night because this fight almost went as a 4-1 or a very close 3-2, but it wasn't as close as what the Kelvin Gastelum fight could have been. So yes, Max Holloway is going to go back down to 145. He has a chin on him. He got hit hard in that first round and probably would have got knocked down had he had 10 less pounds, but you know, the best is blessed, and he seems to have the blessed chin. He continued, right, and he started winning rounds, he started picking up. It was very much brought into the open that as you get into them later rounds, Max Holloway's velocity in terms of strikes landed and thrown, it picks up. Dustin Poirier was obviously getting tired. It looked like in the third round the fight was slipping away from him, but he pulled it out in the fourth with a huge knee which cut Max Holloway open just between two eyes on the bridge of the nose, and it was in a terrible spot. It's wiping blood away from him. It's hard to see, and it was from that point on really where Dustin Poirier confirmed his victory. Now Max Holloway continued, as he does the hero. He's an absolute stud. In Dana White's words, he is a stud, and it's good to see him. Now this isn't necessarily the worst thing to happen to Max Holloway. He's still the champion at 145 and in the featherweight division. Now he's got the likes of Frankie Edgar, he's got Alex Volkanovski and Jose Aldo fighting next. Now I'd prefer Volkanovski over Aldo because Max Holloway already has 2 wins. But this is not a bad thing, it's a learning curve in this game. And to see what Max Holloway's like in the 155 pound division against a power hitter in Dustin Poirier, it's one that we can all learn from, and we can admire how good Max Holloway is at featherweight. Now, you could potentially say if the fight was the other way around, if Dustin Poirier had come down, he would have had a much different result. There would have been less power in his strikes, and Max would have been the same old Max. Now, another top fighter was Khalil Rountree Jr. Coming back from some time out, he had a gap year, shall we say, in Thailand, as everyone does, especially a uni student, but he had the most brutal leg kicks on Eric Anders, and I feel sorry for him. If you've seen Anders' post-fight yesterday, his leg, you could see the toe mark with Khalil Rountree Jr. and he decimated him inside 3 rounds. He knocked him down 8 times within that fight. Now usually the fight would be stopped after 3 takedowns, but Eric Anders, an absolute beast of the man, again staying up, keep getting up and making it to that decision round. And you know, he wasn't ever going to win the decision, but just to get to the end of that fight after being kicked so many times and hurt a lot. He even said he's not had his ass whipped since he was born. So Khalil Rountree really did impress, and you probably would have said he would have got performance of the night until we had the co-main and main event, which stole the show. Now a man who wasn't very happy with the judges was Alan Jouban. He believes he did get the victory over Dwight Grant, but I feel like he was angry because he didn't perform his best. There was booing in this fight, and I am totally against booing. I can understand frustration if the fight's not great, but come on, these guys are putting it all out there. Unless it's someone like a CM Punk, then you've got to be respectful that he's had the guts to get into the octagon. If it's like a Greg Hardy who's got a bad sort of past and life outside the octagon, which is a bit more negative, I can understand booing for personality reasons. But as a fight, do not boo the fights, guys, and it really puts off the production value of someone who watches it when you're trying to enjoy it and you can just hear the booing of the crowd. Now I have to give respect to the Atlanta crowd, because although they did boo, they were amazing in those last two fights in terms of cheering both competitors on. Gastelum, Israel Adesanya had cheers, Max Holloway and Dustin Poirier both had very loud pops and loud cheers to both sides. Now, none of these fighters were from Atlanta, but they really did appreciate the show that these 4 UFC legends put on for them. So yes, UFC 236 was card of the year so far, and we've had 235 and 234, and the main events have all reached the distance. Now I will take a 1-round stoppage in the UFC ESPN Plus fight nights that we have, if we're going to have pay-per-views like that one. The UFC have absolutely smashed it in the past month with the matchups they had, and we're going to have more like that. We've got Jessica Andrade versus Rose Namajunas coming up soon, UFC 238, and of course UFC 239, John Jones, Thiago Santos, Nunes, Holmes, Ben Askren, Masvidal, Robbie Lawler's coming up against Woodley in the coming months. And of course next week we have UFC St. Petersburg with Overeem versus Olenek, who has replaced Alexander Volkov in that fight. So it is looking exciting, and it's one for an MMA fan is one that I'm very looking forward to. So yes, that is the end of Cage Chat. Let me know your thoughts on UFC 236 by tweeting me at CageChatYT. Follow me on Instagram with the same username, and also use the hashtag CageChat for all your interactions on social media. Please give this a like, subscribe, and I'll see you on the 5th round for UFC St. Petersburg.